Welcome to NTD Canada Weekly News. I'm Don Ma. Let's get into this week's topics. On September 24th, Canada released from house arrest Meng Wanzhou, the CFO of China telecom giant Huawei. Hours later, the Chinese Communist Party released the hostages it had been holding, former Canadian diplomat Michael Kovrig and businessman Michael Spavor. The swap is a perfect example of the Chinese Communist Party's hostage diplomacy that has been widely criticized by Western countries. The CCP will arrest someone, usually on trumped-up charges, to negotiate what it wants from a country in lieu of the release of its citizens. In this case, Meng for the two Michaels. According to Global Affairs Canada, as of September 26th, there are at least 115 Canadians still languishing in Chinese communist prisons. But Canada is not alone in facing this Chinese communist challenge. At a recent international forum hosted by the Macdonald-Laurier Institute, an Ottawa-based think tank, experts from Japan, Australia, and Europe came together to discuss how to deal with the CCP's coercive diplomacy. Australia and Japan may be able to help Canada find the answers. In recent years, Australia has also faced this hostage diplomacy. On February 8th, Australian Foreign Minister Marise Payne announced at a press conference that Australian citizen Cheng Lei, who had been detained by the CCP for the last 6 months, had been formally arrested. The foreign minister says, "We will stay in close touch with Chinese authorities as that progresses and, as I said, provide all possible support." Lei is the second Australian citizen to be detained by the CCP. Chinese writer Yang Hengjun was also arrested back in January 2019 and later charged with espionage. Thomas Wilkins, a senior lecturer in security and strategic studies at the University of Sydney, described how Australia has used megaphone diplomacy to successfully resist CCP coercion. In April 2020, Australia publicly called for an independent investigation into the origins of the Chinese Communist Party virus in China. Relations between the two countries have grown increasingly tense since then. In early November that year, the CCP announced a trade ban on Australian goods worth a total of approximately $4 billion. Then, on November 18th, the Sydney Morning Herald reported that Beijing has issued an extraordinary attack on the Australian government, accusing it of poisoning bilateral relations in a deliberately leaked document. Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison responded in an interview with 9 News the following day. He says, "We will always set our own laws and our own rules according to our own national interests, not at the behest of any other nation." In March this year, the CCP imposed another huge tariff, this time on Australian wine. In April, Australia cancelled 2 infrastructure projects linked to the CCP for security reasons. In July, the CCP admitted for the first time that the sanctions on Australian goods were economic penalties. Luke Patey, a senior researcher at the Danish Institute for International Studies, said that because the CCP is concerned about its own interests as well, the effect of economic pressure on other countries is limited.
Beijing often strives to do a do-no-harm approach when it uses economic coercion. It has interests in different industries. It doesn't want to lose access to vital agricultural goods, to vital minerals that it gets from countries like Canada and Australia.
The Sydney Morning Herald reported that from last year to June this year, Australia lost a total of $5.4 billion in exports to China from industries boycotted by the CCP, while Australian exporters made $4.4 billion in new sales to other markets. Australian Treasurer Josh Frydenberg said, "Despite China's wide-ranging actions, our economy has continued to perform very strongly." Wilkins told the forum that Australians have reacted very strongly to the coercive policies of the CCP. Approximately 90% of Australians have a negative view of the party. This has led to the revival of the quadrilateral strategy, Quad, a dialogue between Australia, India, Japan, and the US, and the recently established Australia-UK-US alliance, AUKUS, to jointly counter the CCP threat.
And so actually, these actions are proving very counterproductive.
Here's a look at how Japan is handling the CCP. Japan has also experienced hostage diplomacy and economic coercion from the CCP. A professor at Hokkaido University was detained in September 2019 and repatriated after the Chinese Foreign Ministry claimed he had admitted to illegally collecting state secrets. Stephen Nagy, Senior Associate Professor in International Studies at the International Christian University in Tokyo, Japan, said that Japan has been targeted by the CCP since 2010, after it imposed a rare earth embargo on Japan following the arrest of a Chinese fisherman by Okinawan authorities. And since 2012, Japan has also encountered major problems with the nationalization of the Diaoyu Islands, with more and more Japanese academics being arrested and imprisoned in China. Nagy noted that Japan has strengthened its stance against the Chinese Communist challenge by building a diverse strategic partnership with a number of other countries.
It's further diversifying its position of strength by participating in the Quad, but also investing in what we call multilateral agreements, whether it's the TPP-11, the Japan-EU EPA, Japan-EU Infrastructure and Connectivity Agreement. Japan has been able to navigate this relationship and the coercion, I think, from a position of strength. It continues to deepen its bilateral relationships with the United States, which gives it leverage in pushing back against China on difficult issues.
So what solutions do these experiences from Australia and Japan bring to Canada? A Nanos research poll commissioned by the Globe and Mail on the 11th of this month found that 87% of Canadians support or somewhat support Canada joining the US, UK, and Australia to contain China's growing power. Luke Patey's advice to Canada is to build its own Indo-Pacific strategy, work with more other Asian countries, and move away from economic dependence on the Chinese Communist Party.
The last point I'll make is to not sort of have a China-only strategy, and I agree with you that we need to nest in the wider region of the Indo-Pacific and focus on what other countries in the region, other Asian countries, what they want.
And Nagy stressed that Canada also needs to join a diverse coalition to better counter CCP coercion.
We need to broaden our partnerships. We need to be more multilateral in our engagements so that when economic coercion does happen, or other forms of coercion that do happen, that we can rely on those partners and those economic networks and those strategic partnerships to put collective pressure on Beijing to push back against the various kinds of coercion that we're experiencing.
And that's all for today's topic. Let's watch out for what actions the newly elected government will take to get the CCP to release the 100+ Canadians still jailed in China. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.